Hi there. Welcome to today's session of Beaters Live for our Summer of Safety. I'm Claire Williams from the British Equestrian Trade Association, and this summer we have been running our Summer of Safety campaign, talking about safety in terms of riders and horses and covering topics from body protectors and hats through to yard safety, biosecurity and equine health. And today we're covering feed safety, and I'm lucky to have Kate Hore with me from NAF. Kate is head nutritionist at NAF, where she's worked for more than 20 years. She assists in the formulation of new supplements, as well as ensuring all of the legislation is followed that companies placing feed and supplements on the market are subject to. So I'll welcome Kate. Hi there, Kate.
Hello, Claire. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for joining me today. You also sit on Beaters Feed Committee on behalf of the supplement industry. And I know we often talk about manufacturing both feed and supplements, but a lot of people maybe not be aware. I mean, NAF's a large company, one of the leaders in the supplement market. Can anyone make a supplement and put it on the market?
Well, I think that's quite a commonly held belief, certainly in some quarters, but it's not the case. I think there's sometimes the idea that supplements are this little mysterious group on their own, and actually that's not true at all. What they are is feed, and in fact the word supplement has no legal standing. It's sort of a colloquialism, if you like, that we all know what we mean. Everyone knows what we mean by a supplement, but actually legally the word doesn't exist. What we make is feed. It's complementary feed, and because of that it comes under all the same feed law that your bags of compound feeds, of chaff, nuts, muesli, supplements come under exactly the same requirements. So actually there are quite a few legislative hurdles that you have to go over if you want to start making supplements.
And I know I quite often get people phoning saying, I've made this for my own horse and all my friends are asking me to make it for them. Can I just make it? And they don't realise that they need to talk to their local authority and be registered. And then you're also very controlled about what goes on the label, aren't you? Because that in effect is it's not the recipe, but it tells everybody what goes into it in broad terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people, if they learn one or two things about how to read a label, it should tell you an awful lot, certainly as much as you need to know about the product. It tells you the ingredients under the composition listing, and those ingredients the feed material ingredients will be in inclusion order. So the first one on the list is the biggest one, going down to the smallest one. We also have a lot of legislation covering additives. So the additives that we use we can only use approved additives, and those additives have gone through rigorous testing for efficacy and most importantly for safety. So we're very much controlled on what goes in, and we're also very much controlled on what goes on the label.
And quite often we'll have some other labels, because I know when we're talking to competitors, we say, look for the NOPS label, which means that you're part of the scheme to reduce the risk of naturally occurring prohibited substances occurring in feed and supplements, and the UFAS label. But it's not just competitors, is it? It really, that indicates that the companies have had to go through extra steps.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there are sort of two stages, if you like. There's the quality audit, which shows that independent auditors have come in and they've looked at your processes right from the beginning of right from the field where the herb is grown, which in our case might be anywhere around the world, and right through the supply chain to our production facility in South Wales. So that's going to be something like UFAS or FEMAS or GMP Plus. Those are all well-known quality audits. And then, as I say, a further step on top of that is the Beta NOPS accreditation, which is really there for the competitors. But I often say to horse owners, even if you're not competing, if you see that Beta NOPS logo, you know that product has been produced to the highest possible standard, and that's what we all want for our horses, isn't it? They're our babies, and we want to make sure that everything we use for them is the best quality standard. So that Beta NOPS, I think, is worth looking for whether you're competing or not.
It's a bit like the Beta label on a body protector. It meets the European standard, but that beta labels means the company has chosen to go above and beyond what's absolutely
Exactly.
necessary.
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
really key. And the other thing that people quite a look at, and I've seen this myself, is that sometimes people advertise something being human grade. What does that mean, and does it make it any better?
It certainly doesn't make it better. I always have a little smile when I see human grade quality, and I would say to horse owners, don't be taken in by it, to be honest, because again, we talked a little bit earlier about the control that goes into the ingredients we use, and the positive lists on what we're allowed to use. And actually, those controls are much tighter for animal feed than they are for our own food. Now, that might seem a little bit silly, and you might think, well, surely, human grade is the best possible quality. But again, coming back to the legal standpoint, horses are legally defined as food-producing animals. Now, here in the UK, none of us really want to think about that. We choose not to eat them, and most of us actively take our horse out of the food chain. But that legal standpoint stands the food itself, the feed, in good stead, because it means that what the horse eats has to then be good enough quality to potentially go into the human food chain. In reality, it's not going to happen, but practically it does mean that those ingredients are the highest possible standard. So actually, I'm a little bit disappointed when I see human grade, because I wouldn't lower our products to that standard.
It's a really good point, actually. And you see quite often in other spheres is that actually the requirements that are placed on the horse is higher than that which is placed on the humans.
And the horse can't speak for itself. No animal can speak for itself. So the emphasis is on the legislator, it is on the auditor to put things in place to defend animal welfare. So that's another reason why they're such good quality, these ingredients.
And when you're looking at supplements and their safety, how do you decide, and this is a big topic, I know, whether you need a supplement? What are the sorts of questions that you should be asking yourself before you go down that route?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot involved in that, and probably more than you've got time for today, Claire. But it certainly, in terms of diet balancing, sort of the standard sort of vits and mins type broad spectrum product, there's a few questions you can ask yourself. Firstly, are you feeding those vitamins and minerals elsewhere? Are you feeding a good quality feed or a balancer or something like that provides those vitamins and minerals? And crucially, if you are you feeding the recommended level for your horse and their level of work? Increasingly we find people aren't feeding the full rate of feed. Horses in this country, well, certainly throughout the Western world, are very prone to weight gain, and people find they don't need a lot of hard feed. So if your horse is having a handful of feed, then you probably need a supplement. And if your horse is on a grazing or forage only diet, again, we would say you need a supplement because of soil deficiencies. There are quite common soil deficiencies across the UK. Copper, zinc, selenium are all quite routinely deficient. And that's actually increasing with climate change. The more rain we get, the more deficiencies we're getting in the soil. So they're literally being washed out by these extreme weather events. So if you're on a grazing only high forage diet, then well done you, because that's a good natural diet to be on. But it is prone to vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So a broad spectrum supplement that covers those vits and mins is recommended in that situation.
Yeah, and as you say, the pasture's changed, and a long time ago, the pasture was rich in a lot of those herbs and plants that would have given them some more nutrition, and that has really been overtaken now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, certainly modern pasture is actually it's not quite a single species, but it's not far off. In most modern pastures, you're likely to find maybe a couple of species of grass and maybe one legume, a clover or something. If you compare that to the natural diet where horses would naturally browse on many, many different herbs, trees, shrubs, different grasses, different what we call weeds, but the horse finds a benefit to them. So the natural diet is very much more complex than we get in the modern pasture.
And interesting on supplement, you mentioned before compound feed at their recommended rate. And I think that's one of the tricks, isn't it, as well, when you're feeding supplements, is to know how much you're feeding, because you get a supplement and it says so much of it, and you'll usually get a scoop in the tub.
Yeah.
But is there a danger of not feeding enough, or in fact overfeeding what you are actually supposed to be giving?
Yeah, I mean, just like compound feed, we would advise you to read the label, and make sure you're feeding the amount that the label says for your horse, for their body weight, if that's appropriate, and for their level of work. So do make sure you check it carefully. Make sure you're feeding using the scoop that comes with the feed. We do sometimes get people who have, they're using whatever scoop they might find in the tack room, and that's a dangerous road to go down. So make sure you're using the correct scoop at the correct level. And one good tip is to make sure you level the scoop off, unless the packaging particularly says, for example, one rounded scoop or one heap scoop. Our labels never do, but if a label was to say that, then obviously you would follow that. But if that's not there, then a level scoop is advised, and you can actually get quite a big difference just by not leveling the scoop. You might be feeding 20% more than you think you're feeding.
And that's indicative as well, because I know some of the supplements we've had in the past have said, this tub will be enough for 30 days. And then you get to day 20 and you've run out, and you think, well, that's obviously we're not feeding it to the right ratio.
Yeah, that's it. And we do get that feedback occasionally from customers who say, oh, it hasn't lasted as long as it said it was going to last. And our guys down in our QC lab, they recheck the scoop fill, and it's surprising the difference. I've actually got a scoop here, and if come prepared, and if you take a scoop out of the tub and just shake it, which is what most of us would do, then that bit that's left over the top, it might be, depending on the size of the scoop and depending what product it is, it might be 5, it might be 10 grams more than you thought it was. So what we recommend is actually, taking the top and just leveling it off, and then you know that you're feeding the right level for that scoop.
And if you're feeding more than one supplement, is it possible to actually overfeed in terms of supplements? So could you be feeding too many vits or mins?
Yep, you certainly could. I mean, for most micronutrients, you're unlikely to feed a dangerous level. There are one or two exceptions. Selenium is a good exception, and you have to be very careful with how much selenium you feed. But generally speaking, you're unlikely to feed a dangerous level, but you might be feeding a wasteful level. And that's not good for us either, and it's not good for your wallet. So it is worth checking, and particularly if you've got similar supplements. So for example, if you're feeding a general purpose supplement with a joint supplement, those two are not going to interact, and they're both doing their own job, and that's fine. But if you've got a general purpose supplement with, for example, a vitamin E supplement, then you might think, well, actually, do I need vitamin E in both of these products? And that's when we would say, give the manufacturer a call, have a chat to them about your horse, and see whether you do actually need both of those, or whether just one of them will do.
And would you also have to do the same if you were feeding a balancer and you were feeding a supplement, or a compound in a supplement as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, say if you're feeding below the recommended levels of those, then a good general purpose supplement on top is the right thing to do. But if you are feeding the recommended levels of those, then you probably don't need a general purpose supplement, because there's no point in doubling up, really. So it is worth looking at your feed, but do check how much of that feed you're meant to be feeding. I know it can take a lot of horse owners by surprise. And a lot of horse owners would say, well, I'm not going to feed my horse that much, otherwise he'll explode or whatever. And if that's the case, then you're better on a simple high forage diet with a general purpose supplement.
Yeah, but as you say, it's not necessarily dangerous. It's just that the horse excretes what it doesn't need.
Yeah. So for the vast majority of micronutrients, you're unlikely to feed a dangerous level. It's really much more about making sure the diet's sufficient.
Yeah. Now, and another topic I know that is close to our hearts is sustainability and recycling and the use of plastics. And I've seen a lot of this on blogs and on forums, is that people say, well, can't I just go in and buy a refill? Can't people have like refill stations like you can go and fill up at some supermarkets? Why isn't that feasible for something like supplements?
Yeah, it sounds like a really good idea, doesn't it? I mean, I use a local refill station for my porridge and my cleaning products and such like. So it does sound like a really good idea, but for our equine supplements, it's simply not practical, because it means we would lose control of the quality of that product before it gets to you, the horse owner. We have all these really tight controls, particularly for the hygiene of the product, and particularly for things like the beta nops, the competition suitability. That has to be incredibly tightly controlled. I mean, the controls in our factory, I think horse owners would be quite surprised if they came round and, we have things like negative air pressure to make sure the air is clean around the filling. And, it's really taken to a very high standard. And we're extremely proud of our factory, and everything that comes out of there is pristine. If it then went into a refill station in a stockist, we would lose control. It would be open to the air, and that means there's a potential for contamination. So although it's a lovely idea, unfortunately for horse supplements, it's just not practical. It's not safe, really.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? We want to make certain that it's safe. If you do want to reduce plastic, as a rider, if I want to play my role, how else can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's very relevant to all of us, and there are two key ways you can do it. One is to go for the larger size. Most of our products come in larger sizes, particularly the general purpose, the broad spectrum products, anything like pink powder, general purpose, anything like that. We have up to 10 kilo sizes, and now that might not be sitting on shelf in your local stockist, but if you have a chat to the stockist, they'll be able to get it in for you, no problem at all. So that size uses less plastic proportionally, but it also means that you've got a nice big bucket at the end that you can use for your lorry bucket or a wash so you can reuse rather than recycling. We have people growing tomatoes in 10 kilo pots and things.
That's a good idea.
So we love to see them reuse. So do send in your pictures if you're reusing your larger pots. So that's one way, and the other way is just to read the pot. All of our pots and bottles are roadside recycling, so you can put them into your roadside recycling and make sure they go back into the system that way as well.
And I know, in terms of manufacturers, as manufacturers and people who are placing feed on the market, we're all very conscious about what companies are being asked to do. But as a rider, somebody sitting at home, what's their role in ensuring that feed stays safe and supplements stay safe?
Well, that's right. I mean, our role, as much as we can do, and we do as much as we can possibly do, all we can do is deliver it to the feed store, to your tack shop, in the best possible condition. Once you purchase it and take it home, then it's your responsibility. So you can do very simple things like making sure your feed room is clean and secure, make sure you store everything correctly. One of those labeling requirements we talked about earlier is a requirement for storage. So every label, whether it's a bag of feed or whether it's a supplement, it should have storage guidelines on it. So have a read of that. Generally, it's going to be store in a cool place, but some of our supplements, particularly some of the liquids, do say store at room temperature. So make sure you read the label and just make sure you're storing it correctly. keep anything like medicines, if you've got a few sachets of bute hanging around, then in the feed room is not the place to keep them. Get yourself a nice medicines cabinet that's secure and locked away, so that anything like that is kept entirely separate from feed, particularly for competing horses. And just follow good hygiene. And if you are competing under rules and beta nops is really important to you, then make sure everyone on the yard is aware of that as well. So make sure you're using clean stirrers, clean buckets. Good general feed hygiene will help you go a long way. And one last thing, say if you are competing, it's useful to keep a record of the batch numbers. So for both your compound feeds and your supplements. So just keep a simple record of batch numbers and which horse is having them. And then if you should get a positive test, God forbid, then you can show due diligence. And due diligence is really important to the FEI and to BE within the UK. If you can show due diligence, then they're going to appreciate that you've taken your responsibilities seriously.
And is the batch number easy to find?
Yep, the batch number will be on the label, or for some of them, it's actually sprayed onto the bottle itself or onto the pot. So, but it will definitely be easy to find. It'll be either on the label or directly onto the packaging, but it will be there. And the same with all your compound feeds and chaffs and everything else in the diet.
And finally, in terms of using the supplements, all of them have, it's a bit like human food. They all have a sell-by date. Yep. Is that the use-by date? And if you have got an old supplement, is it worth using? Is it safe, or is it just not going to be as good as it was when you first bought it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the sell-by date, we would recommend that that's the date it's used by, or certainly sort of a month or so after that, so that, within the lifetime of that pot, if you like. So certainly not going very much over that. And what most of them will be safe beyond that date, certainly if they haven't been opened. But the efficacy could be dropping away. Again, particularly dependent on their ingredients. I think we're all familiar with pots of herbs in our kitchen that go a bit dry and brown when they've been there for a long time. And the same will apply to pots of herbs in your feed room. If they've been there far too long, then the efficacy will drop away. But also with the micronutrients, vitamins in particular, vitamins do drop away over time. So the declaration on our label is a lifetime declaration. So the vitamin level on the label is the level you will get at the end of its use by date, rather than the beginning of its use by date. So we factor that in when we label the products. But once you go past that date, then we can't guarantee you're still going to get that level of vitamins.
Yeah, and I suppose
we would advise making sure you use them well within date.
Yeah, which does make sense, because it's the same. And the herbal comparison strikes home, because we went through our cabinet and found a lot of, not horse cabinet, human cabinet, a lot of old herbs, and they just don't taste the same at all.
No, exactly. No.
Yeah. And I think what we're talking about today just shows how much feed safety is at the core of what all the companies do who produce products on the market. As you said before, Kate, is that the horse can't decide what it eats what we're giving it. So it's our role to ensure that we look after the feed when we buy it, and your role to put as the safest possible feed on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I can't put it better than our chairman, actually, Richard Cleave, who he formed NAF, and he still runs NAF some 30 years on. And if you ask him why he does it for the good of the horse. And I don't think you can put it better than that. So everything we do for the good of the horse. And certainly that comes down to making sure that we're making not just efficient, not just products that work, but products that are very safe with very high hygiene standards.
And thank you, Kat. And I think on that note, really, that is the key, isn't it? It's we're all doing it for the good of the horse. So thank you very much indeed. I've learnt some things, and I'm sure everybody who's listening has as well. And thank you very much for taking part.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, Claire. Thank you.